Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, I want you to just stop for a second, engage in a little thought experiment with me. What if, right now, like with a single command, you could instantly hire, let's say, 51 of the world's top specialists? A philosopher who only challenges your assumptions, maybe a CEO ready to navigate your next crisis, a cybersecurity expert, a hyper-focused career counselor, even, I don't know, a stand-up comedian. And they were all just there for you 24/7, waiting for your immediate, expert-level consultation.
That sounds, well, first off, incredibly expensive, like a ridiculously expensive consulting firm,
Right.
and probably completely impractical. But yeah, that's precisely the potential we are diving into today. We've analyzed this really comprehensive source that, honestly, it amounts to a kind of cheat code for these large language models. It's a compiled list of 51, you could say, genius prompts that instantly transform a general, sometimes overwhelming chatbot into a highly focused, rule-bound, and frankly, astonishingly specialized expert.
And that really is our mission today. It's not just about listing, 51 cool things ChatGPT can do in general terms. We're here to deeply dissect the actual structure of these advanced prompts.
Right.
We're talking about the strategic constraints, the non-negotiable rules, the specific inputs, basically everything that allows you to pull out the best, most targeted, and most actionable information. This is really about understanding at a fundamental level this critical emerging skill of talking to AI effectively.
Yeah, and if you look at the source material, this list of 51 roles, it was compiled and refined from various contributions, often sourced originally from open platforms, things like GitHub, specifically to help users really maximize their interaction utility. And the foundational concept, the thing that unites all 51 prompts, is actually quite simple. You mandate the AI to act as, or maybe play the role of, a specific constrained persona.
It's sort of like the digital equivalent of demanding, professional attire and specific behavioral rules for a meeting. You tell the AI, okay, you are now wearing the suit of a recruiter, and bam, suddenly it has to adhere strictly to the rules of that profession, even if that means suppressing 99% of its general knowledge base to do it.
Exactly. And the most crucial element, the piece that really elevates these prompts beyond just a generic request like, tell me about X, is the use of these non-negotiable behavioral constraints. We see these limits imposed globally across many roles. For example, there's that French phrase found in many of the original prompts, n'écris pas d'explication, or, do not write explanations.
Okay, I'm curious about the strategic need for that specific constraint.
Oh.
Why is shutting down the explanation function so crucial?
Well, think about it. If you just ask a general chatbot a question, its default mode is often quite didactic, teacher-like. It might spend 2 paragraphs sort of justifying its answer, which, frankly, seriously slows down professional workflow. It just clogs the output with unnecessary text. By adding that explicit constraint, no explanations, you force the AI to deliver pure, unadulterated, functional output. It shifts the AI from being a perpetual teacher to being a disciplined tool.
Ah, okay. That immediately changes the dynamic, doesn't it? From sort of a learning experience to more of a task completion system.
Precisely. And another critical constraint, one that's particularly vital in interactive roles like, say, interview simulations, is the turn-taking requirement. The prompt mandates respond only as the character and, crucially, wait for the user's response to continue the dialogue. This restriction fundamentally transforms the AI from just a monologue generator into a true interactive partner or opponent, which is key, really key, to making the AI useful for practice and simulation. And that's exactly where we should start our deep dive, these professional simulations.
Okay, let's unpack this first block then. Starting in the corporate suite, as you called it. We're analyzing roles designed to simulate these high-stakes professional environments, offering, extremely practical advice and realistic simulations that you just aren't going to get from a general search engine.
Right. And the first one, maybe the most intensely constrained role, is act as a recruiter. The primary utility here, really, is to provide genuine, high-friction interview practice.
Yeah, I can see the value immediately. We've all done those mock interviews with friends, right? But the friend knows you. They might go easy on you. The AI is truly impartial. But what are the strict constraints here that make this specific prompt, well, genius?
The prompt is incredibly granular. So the user specifies the exact role they're interviewing for, let's say, a Node.js backend developer or maybe a senior marketing manager. The AI must then respond only as the recruiter. It explicitly mandates, and this is the core part, do not write the entire conversation at once. I want you to only do the interview with me. Ask me the questions one by one like a recruiter does, and wait for my responses. Do not write explanations or provide feedback until the end.
That turn-taking mechanism.
Yeah.
That seems strategically necessary. It stops the AI from kind of cheating by just generating the whole script in one go. It forces the user, the candidate, to actually go through a step-by-step, realistic interview process. It makes them think on their feet after each question, precisely replicating the real pressure of the moment.
That strategic friction is the learning mechanism. If we connect this to the bigger picture, what this provides is immediate, personalized, and crucially repeatable skills development. You can practice this at 3 a.m. before a big interview if you need to. It moves beyond just rote memorization into adaptive, real-time communication skills development.
Okay, so contrast that really focused, single-purpose role with something slightly broader but maybe equally strategic. The role of ACT as a career counselor. This feels like it needs to synthesize much more subjective data, right?
It does, yeah. The career counselor has to be much more analytical than the recruiter persona. The role involves assessing the user's skills, their interests, their past experience, all to recommend suitable career paths. But the critical expansion here is the requirement for active external data integration. The counselor must research market trends, explain the job market outlook in different sectors, and suggest specific beneficial qualifications and even certifications.
So it's not just simply matching an interest to a job title then. If I tell the AI, look, I'm interested in software engineering, but my background's in biology, the AI is constrained to not only maybe suggest bioinformatics, but also research the current demand for, say, Python programmers in that specific sector, and then recommend the specific cloud certifications that are actually going to maximize my starting salary and my career mobility.
Exactly. It creates a concrete roadmap. It shifts the discussion from, vague career aspirations to a concrete plan of specific, actionable steps. And it's all based on synthesized market data.
Okay, moving up the organizational ladder a bit, we have the role of ACT as a CEO, Chief Executive Officer. Now we're demanding some high-stakes strategy, leadership, and crisis management skills.
Absolutely. The CEO role requires the AI to really focus on strategic decision-making, managing the company's financial performance, and maybe most importantly, handling external stakeholders. We're talking shareholders, the press, regulators. The sample challenge provided in the source material, managing a crisis involving a product recall, that's a perfect test case for these constraints.
Right, because if you ask a general chatbot, how do I handle a product recall, you probably just get a generic, 5-step list.
Yeah.
But when you force it to act as the CEO, what new constraints actually emerge? What changes?
Well, the CEO must consider the inherent tension between immediate logistical action, getting the product back, and the long-term brand equity. How does this look? For instance, the prompt might demand something like, draft a public statement focused on minimizing liability, but simultaneously draft an internal memo prioritizing employee morale and rapid inventory assessment. The AI has to synthesize these often conflicting goals: PR strategy, shareholder confidence, legal risk, internal communications, all at the same time under the banner of a single accountable persona. The output shifts from just a textbook definition of crisis management to a first-person strategic roadmap guided by complex, real-world business practices.
That really demonstrates how the persona forces the AI to consider trade-offs, which is crucial, rather than just generating a laundry list of possible options.
Precisely. Okay, let's move to some of the specialized consulting roles now, maybe starting with act as a tech critic.
Okay, a tech critic. I imagine the constraint here is forcing some kind of neutrality and structured comparison, which can be hard in the tech world where opinions often run pretty hot.
It is hard, yeah. The tech critic prompt requires the AI to provide an in-depth, structured review of a specified technology. The example given was an older device, the iPhone 11 Pro Max. This role demands a comprehensive framework for analysis: pros, cons, features, and crucially, market comparisons with rival products that were available at the time of its release. This structure forces a comprehensive, balanced assessment, actively avoiding just cheerleading or a simple feature summary. It demands a more journalistic, maybe even cynical and comparative perspective.
Right, so it can't just list the camera specs. It actually has to weigh those specs against, say, the contemporary Samsung Galaxy model from that year and assess the overall value proposition.
Correct. Now, the accountant role, that sounds purely computational, right? Until you see the requirements for creative strategy.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is that this role is specified as being about creative financial management. It demands considering budgeting, investment strategies, both short and long-term, risk management. But the constraint that seems to add the real value is a mandate that the accountant must also advise on tax laws and regulations, specifically to maximize profits.
That's synthesizing several really complex fields at once. The request example is specific. Create a financial plan for a small business that focuses on significant cost savings and long-term investments. So the AI has to perform this dynamic calculus, balancing immediate liquidity needs against, say, tax-advantaged long-term growth instruments, all while minimizing operational expenses. It's strategic financial prediction, not just balancing the books.
And similarly, the consultant in web design. This is where I guess hard technical knowledge meets the softer skills of user experience. We probably need to be clear about those terms, UX and UI.
Absolutely. So this role requires suggesting suitable interfaces and features that adhere strictly to both UX, user experience principles, which is really about how the site feels to use, the flow, the intuition, and UI, user interface principles, which is more about how the site looks and functions technically. And all of this while meeting the company's underlying business goals. The example given is helping design an e-commerce site specifically for jewelry.
Why is the jewelry e-commerce constraint significant there? What does that force?
Well, because it forces the AI to prioritize things like trust, visual fidelity, and security. For a jewelry site, the consultant must ensure things like high-resolution image support, that's visual fidelity, a UI constraint, a really frictionless checkout process, that's UX, strong security signals on the payment page, which is both a business goal and builds UX trust, and guaranteed mobile responsiveness, because let's face it, a huge percentage of luxury browsing happens on mobile devices these days. It's a fusion of aesthetic appeal, inventory management logic, and profit-driven design choices.
Okay, so what's the common thread weaving through all of these professional roles, from the CEO down to the web consultant?
It seems like the persona, the act as, forces the AI to look at a problem through a very specific, constrained, sometimes high-friction lens. The specificity of the prompt is really the necessary key to escaping those generic answers we all complain about when using these tools generally.
So it's about imposing a professional methodology.
Exactly. You're not just asking for information, you're demanding the AI generate information using the established methodology of a specialized profession. That's the step change.
All right, moving on to section 2. Let's talk about language. For a lot of users, I think AI is primarily a communication tool. But these next roles seem incredibly strict, forcing the AI to become like the ultimate editor, tutor, and maybe even a rhetorical assassin in one case.
Yeah, this section has some of the absolute best examples of extreme constraints, specifically designed for iterative learning and refinement. The role of ACT as a spoken English professor and improver is just a masterclass in prompt engineering for pedagogy, for teaching.
Okay, remind us of those rules again, because they sounded really detailed and quite impressive.
They are multi-layered and completely non-negotiable. Okay, first, the AI must respond in English. Simple enough. Second, it must limit the response strictly to 100 words. That's a maximum volume constraint. Third, it must strictly correct any grammar, typos, or factual errors the user makes in their own input. And fourth, and this is really critical for sustaining the dialogue, after all that correction, it must pose a new question back to the user to keep the conversation going.
I'm curious, though, what's the pedagogical value of that 100-word limit? Doesn't that potentially limit the depth of the feedback you get?
It limits overwhelm. That's the key. The 100-word ceiling ensures the student gets instant, targeted feedback. The output is limited so they don't feel just inundated by a wall of text. And that required continuation, the question back, ensures the learning loop never breaks. It forces conciseness from the instructor, the AI, and constant engagement from the student. This is so much better than just asking the AI, how can I improve my English? Which just results in a multi-paragraph generic essay.
That constraint really turns the AI from just a general language resource into a kind of high-intensity personal pedagogical device, focused on maximizing conversational effectiveness through tightly controlled interaction volume.
Exactly. Now let's look at maybe the slightly darker side of language, the need for structural transformation without detection. The role of ACT as a plagiarism checker or rewriter is equally constrained, but for a completely different, almost stealthy purpose.
Right. The unique constraint here is fascinating because it tackles that specific challenge, preserving the meaning, the semantics, while completely overhauling the structure.
The mandate is absolute. The AI must rewrite the given sentence without being detected by plagiarism checks, and it must respond only in the language of the original sentence with absolutely no explanations.
That no explanations rule seems even more critical here, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because any extra text would just break that seamless translation or rewriting process. But how can we actually trust an AI to accurately judge what another detection AI can spot? Isn't that just a continuous arms race problem?
It absolutely is a continuous race, yes. But the constraint forces the AI to deploy its deepest understanding of semantic structure. It has to change the sentence's syntax, maybe rearrange clauses, swap out high-frequency words for synonyms, alter the sentence rhythm, all while rigorously maintaining the original complex meaning.
Let's use that French example from the source material just to illustrate how difficult this is. Pour que les ordinateurs se comportent comme des humains, les systèmes de reconnaissance vocale doivent être capables de traiter des informations non verbales, comme l'état émotionnel de l'orateur. That's a pretty complex, multi-clause sentence about nonverbal information processing in AI.
Right. The AI can't just change 3 words and call it a day. It has to fundamentally restructure the entire argument flow. Maybe invert the main clause or change from active to passive voice or vice versa. It has to generate a fully rephrased version in French, distinct enough to pass detection software, and it must deliver only that rewritten sentence, nothing else.
Wow. The level of linguistic nuance required for that specific kind of stealthy task is just astonishing. And following that, we have the role of ACT as an AI writing tutor, which focuses more on composition structure than just grammar, right?
Yes, the writing tutor leverages advanced AI tools, specifically natural language processing, NLP, but it applies them through a rhetorical and stylistic lens. The goal is to provide feedback to a student, maybe someone revising a complex master's thesis, not just on comma usage, but on improving the strength of their thesis statement, ensuring logical flow between paragraphs, maximizing clarity when expressing complex thoughts. It blends technological analysis like NLP, recognizing patterns of strong or weak rhetoric, with traditional pedagogical knowledge about what makes writing effective.
Okay, let's pivot now from academic rigor to more public persuasion and high-impact communication.
Right, these next roles are all about mastering the delivery and the impact of content. For example, act as a public speaking coach.
And this coach, presumably, has to do more than just edit the speech text itself.
Oh, much more. This coach develops clear communication strategies. It advises on nonverbal elements like body language, vocal inflection, pace. It teaches techniques specifically designed to help overcome stage fright. The specific example given is coaching an executive for a major high-stakes keynote speech. The AI, acting as the coach, has to analyze the content and then prescribe specific physical and behavioral techniques to maximize the audience impact.
Yeah, a keynote speech requires tailoring complex ideas for a specific audience, injecting personality. So the AI, acting as the coach, has to consider performance elements alongside the content strategy. It's like synthesizing performance art with business communication.
Absolutely. Then you have act as a debater. This is a really powerful learning tool, I think, because it demands rigorous balance. This role requires researching both sides of a current affairs topic, presenting valid arguments for each side, refuting opposing views systematically, and this is key, drawing conclusions based only on evidence presented.
The sample request mentioned was for an opinion article on Dino. For our listeners who might be less tech-focused, Dino is a modern, secure runtime environment for JavaScript and TypeScript, sort of like Node.js but newer. Asking the AI to debate this means it really has to understand the technical trade-offs, the performance differences, maybe the long-term viability arguments for specific software infrastructure.
Correct. The AI is forced to be balanced and systematically argumentative. It essentially creates structured, high-quality discourse, which is vital, I think, for developing critical thinking skills in the user.
And finally, in this section, the orator, or motivational speaker. The constraint here seems to be purely about emotional impact.
Yeah, the goal is emotional resonance and driving action. The prompt requires gathering inspiring words that resonate deeply with the audience, driving them toward action, toward perseverance, like delivering a speech on the necessity of never giving up. The AI has to adopt this high-energy, high-pathos rhetorical style, probably using metaphors, analogies, storytelling techniques to achieve those inspirational goals.
So it seems, whether you need analytical precision for a thesis, linguistic stealth for rewriting, or just pure emotional uplift in a motivational speech, the specific prompt constraints force the AI into the required linguistic and rhetorical mode. That's the power, isn't it? Setting the rules up front and demanding specific stylistic adherence.
Okay, this next section is arguably where the AI provides maybe the most profound value, challenging our assumptions, providing deep context, and assisting in academic and ethical grounding. We're essentially turning the AI into the scholar, bound by logic and historical methodology.
We start in the realm of philosophy. Now, we actually have two similar sounding roles here. Professor of philosophy and philosopher. You mentioned before the distinction lies in the output expectation, but maybe let's make that crystal clear for everyone.
Okay, let's use an example, say Stoicism. The professor of philosophy is primarily the explainer. The task is to explain complex concepts, like Stoicism, in an easy-to-understand way, using relatable contemporary examples, breaking down difficult ideas. So if the user asks about Stoicism, the professor will explain Epictetus's concepts of control and dichotomy, but maybe in simple, modern language. The goal is application, for instance, applying different philosophical theories to daily life. The professor clarifies and contextualizes.
Well, the philosopher role.
The philosopher is more the explorer and the proposer. This role involves exploring concepts really in depth, researching various theories, proposing new ideas based on those frameworks, and finding creative solutions to new problems. The request example given was developing an ethical framework for decision-making regarding a modern technology like autonomous vehicles. This moves way beyond mere explanation into synthesizing and actually creating novel intellectual structures, though hopefully based on historical precedent.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think, and critically important. Act as Socrates. And we have two distinct prompts here, which really highlights the subtlety of behavioral constraint.
Yeah, the general prompt is pretty flexible.
Yeah.
Just participate in philosophical discussions using the standard Socratic method on broad topics like justice, virtue, courage. That gives you a good discussion partner. But the strict prompt is a true intellectual challenge. It's designed specifically for rigorous self-critique. The AI must use the Socratic method to challenge the user's beliefs line by line, testing their foundational logic and exposing their underlying assumptions.
Okay, this is a critical point, though. If the AI is programmed only to challenge logic, doesn't that fundamentally remove the human element of, say, intuition or deeply held belief from the discussion? Is that the point?
That is the function of the constraint in this specific prompt. The AI isn't there to validate your feeling or your intuition. It's there purely to test the logical structure of your argument. So if the user states, as the example suggests, La justice est nécessaire dans une société. Justice is necessary in a society. The AI's only job, its only permitted response, is to immediately question the premise or the definition or the scope or the implication of that statement, maybe in a single line. It forces the user to defend their foundation. It might respond with something like, and what precisely do you mean by necessary, given the historical variance in judicial systems?
Wow. It creates a deliberately adversarial learning environment, designed purely to expose faulty reasoning and demand absolute definitional clarity. If we connect this to the bigger picture, that strict Socrates prompt sounds like the ultimate tool for combating confirmation bias. The AI is rigorously programmed to disagree and dismantle, not just to affirm or agree.
And this kind of methodological rigor is carried over into the research-focused roles as well. Act as an academician focuses on methodological requirements. The AI must identify reliable sources, which is a major constraint needed for LLMs that often hallucinate citations. It needs to organize material in a structured way, intro, methods, conclusion, etc., and accurately document findings using proper citations.
So the key constraint there is the forced adherence to academic citation standards. That acts as a crucial quality check for the information being generated, right?
Yeah.
Prevents the AI from just making unsupported claims.
Exactly. But perhaps the most memorable role in this section, and certainly the one most immediately applicable to our daily lives, is the fallacy finder, or dénicheur de fausses idées. This is just pure, constrained critical analysis in action.
Its core function is basically to be a logic detective, signaling invalid arguments, identifying illogical errors, spotting sophisms, faulty reasoning, false assumptions. And the example provided in the sources is that classic logical fallacy. Ce shampooing est excellent car. Cristiano Ronaldo l'a utilisé dans la publicité. This shampoo is excellent because Cristiano Ronaldo used it in the ad.
Yeah, that example perfectly illustrates the appeal to authority fallacy, or maybe appeal to celebrity, which is related. The fallacy finder identifies that the person using the shampoo, Ronaldo, has absolutely no expertise related to the shampoo's chemical composition or its effectiveness. Therefore, the argument is invalid for proving the product's quality. It's just an endorsement.
This role feels like an intellectual shield you could use immediately for filtering online news, political claims, marketing slogans, pretty much everywhere. If a politician says, we must cut taxes because my wealthy neighbor who runs a successful business told me it works, the fallacy finder immediately flags the anecdotal evidence and the appeal to irrelevant authority.
And finally, in this scholarly section, we have the historian. This role demands the analysis of past cultural, economic, political, social events, and it requires collecting data specifically from primary sources and then developing evidence-based theories. The example was discovering facts about labor strikes in early 20th century London.
Why is that primary source constraint so important for the historian persona?
Because it forces the AI to provide granular detail and contextual nuance, rather than just summarizing a secondary source like a textbook. To discuss early 20th century London labor strikes properly, the AI must cite specific details, things like the dates, the names of the organizing bodies, the specific economic conditions at the time, perhaps quotes from contemporary newspaper reports, details which typically only appear in primary time-bound data. This ensures a proper temporal perspective and methodological rigor.
It seems like these scholarly roles really showcase the AI's power to act as a rigorous, skeptical, and methodologically sound research partner, moving well beyond just simple Wikipedia lookups into genuine intellectual investigation. Okay, let's shift gears completely now and look at how these roles can maximize creative output, because often when we use AI for creative tasks, we tend to get fairly generic, middle-of-the-road output, precisely because we don't give it enough constraints, maybe. But these roles seem to enforce a specific creative persona with strategic, often professional goals.
Yeah, the first cluster here deals with strategic marketing. Take the role of ACT as an advertiser. This isn't just about asking it to write a catchy slogan. The AI is constrained to create an entire campaign.
Okay, what does that comprehensive constraint actually entail? What does entire campaign mean here?
It means the AI has to execute a multi-step process. First, defining a precise target audience. Then, developing maybe 3 core key messages or slogans. Then, selecting the most effective media channels for promotion. And finally, determining all the necessary supporting activities. The specific request example was creating an advertising campaign for a new energy drink targeting young adults aged 18 to 30.
Right, so that requires market understanding, developing a brand voice, some psychological targeting, cross-platform planning. The AI has to consider what actually concerns this demographic. Maybe it's sustainability, maybe mental performance, and then tailor its message, its slogan, and the channel, like TikTok, specific gaming platforms, whatever, accordingly. The prompt ensures the AI delivers a whole strategy document, not just an ad slogan.
Similarly, the social media manager role requires real operational knowledge. This manager has to develop and execute cross-platform campaigns, actively engage the audience, monitor conversations, perhaps using simulated community management tools, and use analytics to measure success. This demands technical and logistical knowledge, for instance, detailing how to manage a Twitter presence to maximize brand awareness through strategic posting times and effective hashtag research.
Okay, so the social media manager is focused on execution, logistics, analytics. How does that differ significantly from the social media influencer role? They sound related.
They are related, but the influencer focuses purely on the aesthetic and the engagement side. The constraints demand creating engaging, platform-specific content tailored for Instagram or Twitter or YouTube specifically to increase brand awareness and promote products. The example was an Instagram campaign for a new line of athleisure clothing.
So the prompt forces the influencer AI to really internalize the visual language of Instagram. High-quality imagery, concise, relatable captions, using the right tagging strategies. It requires a specific, maybe aspirational and highly visual voice that the general AI probably wouldn't default to on its own.
Exactly. And if we compare that influencer persona to the essayist or editor role, the difference is really stark. The essayist is constrained by structured intellectual persuasion. It completely abandons the casual visual tone of the influencer.
Right. The essayist has to formulate a strong, debatable thesis statement and create a persuasive piece of work that's both informative and engaging, adhering to the rules of rhetoric and composition. The example was writing a persuasive essay on reducing plastic waste. The constraint here is all about internal rigor, maintaining a clear argument flow, using strong supporting evidence, and employing formal rhetoric.
Okay, now for the more purely artistic roles. Storyteller, poet, and stand-up comedian. These roles require the AI to generate specific affect and style.
The storyteller seems to be about invention, creating engaging, imaginative, captivating stories that are tailored to a target audience. That audience could range from children, maybe using animal characters, to adults, perhaps using historical themes. The source example was needing an interesting story about perseverance. So the constraint is really narrative quality and achieving emotional investment from the reader.
The poet, however, focuses on a different kind of emotional depth, and often brevity. The poet creates verses that evoke emotion, focusing on a beautiful and meaningful expression. The prompt explicitly mentions imagining short, powerful verses like needing a poem about love, which demands things like brevity, rhythm, metaphor, and emotional impact. It needs to move beyond just simple rhyming structures.
And the most difficult one, in my opinion at least, act as a stand-up comedian. That requires not just creativity, but a real understanding of timing, delivery, and cultural context.
Absolutely. The comedian needs wit, creativity, the ability to incorporate personal anecdotes, even if fictionalized, of course, and keen observation to generate a sketch based on current events. The source example was providing a humorous perspective on politics. This forces the AI to adopt a comedic cadence, maybe a slightly cynical or self-deprecating tone, and a specific structure setup, punchline, maybe a tag, which is a major and really difficult shift from its usual helpful, neutral persona.
Yeah, this whole section really proves that by giving the AI a creative job title and specific execution constraints, like platform, style, goal, you can push its output from just a generic, forgettable draft towards highly stylized professional content that might be ready for immediate use.
Okay, our final section covers the really practical, personal, and sometimes quite niche applications. This is where we turn the AI into a customized daily assistant that integrates into highly specific aspects of the user's life. This is where the true utility of these specialized prompts can be maximized for the individual, I think.
We'll start with the roles focused on structured self-improvement, beginning with the life coach.
Right. The life coach provides strategies for better decision-making and goal achievement. It has a strong focus on behavior modification, building habits, and managing difficult emotions. The prompt specifically mentioned developing healthier habits for stress management. This requires the AI to deliver structured behavioral advice, perhaps based on cognitive behavioral principles, rather than just generalized empathetic listening.
So it has to move beyond just saying, it's okay, feel your feelings, towards something like, okay, first, identify the triggers for your stress. Second, replace the anxious behavior with, say, a 5-minute deep breathing exercise. Third, track this change daily. More prescriptive.
Exactly. Then there's the relationship coach. This coach offers suggestions on conflict resolution, specific communication techniques, and improving mutual understanding between two people in conflict. The example was resolving conflicts between spouses. The constraint here demands an impartial mediating tone that's focused entirely on constructive conversation techniques. Things like active listening prompts or maybe even scripts based on nonviolent communication principles.
We also saw 2 related philosophical roles kind of repurposed for daily guidance: self-help book and aphorism book. What's the practical difference in their constrained output? How do they differ?
Well, the self-help book gives very actionable advice and tips on improving specific life areas like relationships, career development, financial planning. It's highly tactical. It might offer, 3 steps to create a budget or 5 tips for a healthier relationship dynamic. The aphorism book, conversely, is more strategic and focuses on providing wisdom for resilience. It provides wise counsel, inspiring quotes, meaningful sayings for daily guidance, but also includes practical application methods. It focuses more on the big picture perspective, like advice on how to stay motivated when facing long-term adversity.
Ah, okay. It's the difference between do this specific thing today and think like this consistently forever. One guides action, the other guides mindset. Makes sense.
Moving into lifestyle, we have some very specific utility roles. Act as a personal chef is extremely constrained in its output format.
Yeah, the constraints require considering dietary preferences, allergies, sure, but the absolute rules seem to be respond only with recipe recommendations. No explanations, no, here's a lovely recipe I found. No nutritional breakdown unless specifically requested.
Exactly. It's pure functional recipe card output. The example, healthy dinner ideas for a vegetarian must result in nothing but a list of ingredients and instruction sets. It maximizes speed and utility for someone who just needs a recipe fast.
Then the interior designer. This one suggests themes, color combinations, furniture placement, decorative options, all to enhance aesthetics and comfort. The constraint here seems to be blending that artistic sensibility with very practical space planning. The example was designing a foyer or hallway, which requires the AI to consider things like light flow, traffic patterns, maybe even budgetary restrictions if specified.
Now, 2 of the most critical personal roles, I think, and probably the ones requiring the most complex synthesis, are the doctor and the psychologist dream interpreter. The doctor role is quite remarkable because it explicitly proposes creative and holistic treatments.
Creative treatments from an AI doctor. I admit I'm a bit skeptical there. What exactly does the prompt demand that makes this distinct from just looking up symptoms online?
Well, the constraint requires balancing conventional medicine, herbal remedies, and natural alternatives, all while factoring in the patient's age, lifestyle, and detailed medical history. The example, a holistic treatment plan for an elderly arthritis patient demands synthesizing multiple disciplines: pharmacology, for conventional pain management, naturopathy, maybe diet changes, supplements, specific herbal treatments, and geriatrics, thinking about mobility concerns, low-impact lifestyle changes.
Okay, so that demands a pretty complex risk-benefit analysis where the AI has to weigh potential drug interactions against the possible efficacy of natural alternatives. Obviously, the user should definitely proceed with extreme caution and consult a real doctor. But the request itself demands an integrated approach that a general search engine just cannot provide.
Exactly. The constraint is on the synthesis and integration across different modalities. Now, the psychologist and dream interpreter roles nicely show the distinction between science and symbolism.
How does the constraint separate those two functions clearly?
The psychologist provides scientific suggestions based on the user's expressed thoughts, aimed at improving their well-being. It must rely on evidence-based methodologies, perhaps referencing techniques like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, or specific relaxation techniques from scientific literature. It is scientifically constrained. The dream interpreter, however, provides factual interpretations based solely on documented symbols and themes present in the dream, like the example of being chased by a giant spider. And it must explicitly avoid personal opinions or giving any clinical advice. The interpreter is constrained to objective, documented symbolism. For instance, the spider might symbolize a fear of control, or perhaps a feminine archetype, depending on which school of interpretation, like Freudian or Jungian, it's programmed to follow.
That makes perfect sense. The interpreter gives you the dictionary of symbols. The psychologist suggests the scientifically backed intervention strategy.
Okay, now let's wrap up with the really niche and the meta AI roles, which truly show the extreme scope of specialization possible.
Right, we have the salesperson. The constraint here seems entirely behavioral and persuasive.
Yeah, the challenge is simply to convince the user to buy something, often by making it appear more valuable than it actually is. The initial query is a role-play scenario. I'm pretending you called me on the phone. Hello, why did you call? This tests the AI's ability to maintain a persuasive, maybe high-pressure, potentially even emotionally manipulative persona designed to overcome immediate skepticism and objections.
Then the domain name generator. This is one of the most rigorously constrained examples we've seen, isn't it?
It's pure functional ideation. The AI must respond only with a list of short domain alternatives. Maximum 7-8 letters was specified that are unique and catchy based on a business idea provided by the user, and absolutely no explanations. That short letter limit forces conciseness, which maximizes memorability and increases the potential availability of the domain. It's creative output constrained by extreme brevity and market utility.
We also have the statistician, requiring knowledge of terminology, distributions, confidence intervals, probability, hypothesis testing.
Right. The example calculating how many millions of banknotes are used globally requires applying complex mathematical models and probability concepts to large-scale data. It demands specific methodological terminology in its response, not just a number.
And finally, two roles focused on interacting with other AIs. First, act as a mid-journey prompt generator.
Yes, this requires providing detailed and creative descriptions specifically designed to generate high-quality images in other AI platforms, like Midjourney or DALL-E. It focuses on using abstract concepts, specifying lighting, style, composition details to inspire unique images. The constraint forces the AI to write visually, translating a concept into highly specific, machine-readable imagery commands. The description provided in the source was really illustrative. A field of wildflowers extends to the horizon, each with a different color and shape. In the distance, a massive tree dominates the landscape, its branches rising toward the sky like tentacles. You can almost see the image it's trying to create.
Yeah, that is literally writing for an AI artist. And the ultimate meta role, act as a prompt generator.
This is basically the architect of the entire system we've been discussing. The AI takes a simple title from the user, say, act as a code review helper, and then it generates the comprehensive, self-explanatory prompt, complete with all the necessary constraints and instructions. It essentially acts as the prompt engineer for the user, acknowledging that writing these really effective prompts requires an understanding of the underlying constraints that govern the AI's optimal behavior knowledge most users probably don't possess or don't have time to develop.
So if you know what task you want the AI to perform, but you don't necessarily know how to write the perfect set of constraints to get that expert level output, you just ask the prompt generator to write the expert script for you.
Yeah.
That kind of closes the loop entirely on specialized utility, doesn't it? Hashtag tag outro.
Absolutely. And if we synthesize everything we've covered across these, 51 specialized roles, the fundamental lesson is, I think, crystal clear. The real power of AI isn't just in its general, wide-ranging knowledge base, but in its ability to adopt these specific personas governed by strict behavioral rules.
Yeah, the more focused and constrained you make the prompt, like that 100-word limit for the English professor or the respond only with questions rule for Socrates or only give domain names for the generator, the better, the deeper, and honestly, the more functional the output becomes.
Hmm.
It really is the difference between asking a crowded, noisy room for general advice versus consulting a single, hyper-focused, disciplined expert who knows exactly what you need.
And learning how to interact with AI using these kinds of constraints. It's not just a fleeting trend, is it? It is a critical, emerging skill. It's what separates the general user from the power user who can really leverage these tools. These 51 prompts serve as incredibly powerful templates for creating your own hyper-specific AI tools. They allow you to turn that overwhelming sea of information we all face into highly organized, actionable insights that are tailored precisely to your strategic needs.
So we really want you, the listener, to reflect now. Which of these roles offers the most radical shift in how you approach your own personal or professional challenges? Which AI persona, maybe the rigorous recruiter forcing you to perform under pressure, the challenging Socratic philosopher dismantling your assumptions, the synthesizing accountant managing your finances, perhaps the holistic doctor integrating complex treatment ideas, which one will you test first to revolutionize the way you work and learn?
Yeah, it really is time to stop treating these tools like simple search engines and start demanding expert disciplined performance that's tailored exactly to your unique needs.
Absolutely. So if this deep dive helped you unlock some new potential in your understanding, if it showed you how to harness the specialized power of AI, then please ensure you don't miss our next session. We really encourage you to subscribe to the channel right now if you haven't already. Please share this deep dive with friends, colleagues, anyone you think needs this kind of knowledge to excel. And most importantly, let us know what stood out to you the most by writing a comment below. Your feedback genuinely helps us explore more topics that you need to master.